Stacy Johnson, and I'm using a new Thank You for Recycling sign for our local recycling center. I had noticed that our Thank You for Recycling sign was showing a lot of wear and tear, and I was thinking that with current budgets and issues, that might be the reason that they had let it get to a state of such disrepair. Maybe they didn't have the same personnel to create it or fix it. And then one day when we went to recycle, the whole thing had fallen down and it was just laying there in a plop on the side of the road. So I decided to contact the main person in charge of recycling for our township and offered to create a new one for them and donate it. And I had thought about doing something much more simple in terms of design. But, you know, I really enjoy painting, and I really felt like it was a way to put a little more time and effort into it and really kind of try and express to the other members of the community how their community mindedness is appreciated by lots of others of us that do the same thing. And so I decided to do something a little more complicated. And so I started just looking around at other signs and ones that I saw that I liked and ones that were interesting. And so the other part of it, as you can see, there are some natural design elements of the sign, and that's kind of hoping to bring in people's thinking of why it is that we are recycling. When, you know, you go there and sometimes it seems like a pain, or if you're trying to recycle stuff in the middle of winter and it's cold, and it's just nice to make that effort and remember why it is that recycling's important and why we all do it. I have mixed all of the colors all myself from the basic primary ones. And this is a really good example, I think, and part of the you know, idea behind this project is also to, you know, hopefully inspire some other community members to say, wow, you know what? Somebody else in my community took the time to make this sign on their own. You know, they did all of the work. You know what? Maybe I could do that. Maybe there's a way that I can help out in my community. It doesn't even necessarily have to do anything with recycling. It can just be, you know, maybe you know, I've never done any kind of sign painting. I'm not a professional artist. I'm, you know, but I have extra resources that I can put towards community projects, and I can make time for things that I feel are important. And, you know, hopefully somebody else will see this and say, you know what, I could do the same thing. Maybe it's helping out at the library, or helping out mentoring students in the community, or anything else that needs to be done that doesn't necessarily require special skills or money, just requires time. And that's one of my greatest hopes for this project. An issue of, on so many levels, a community-based issue, and we're all part of the same community, whether it's our local township or a township across the country or a township across the ocean. It's the same issues, it's the same earth, it's the same base foundation that we all share, and I think that when we take care of ourselves and we take care of each other and we take care of our community and our environment, that those are very important aspects of existence. We have limited resources and we have limited space and we have limited options, and there are lots of better ways that we can deal with these options, but right now recycling is one of the only basic ways that we have of reusing a lot of the containers and refuse that our culture sadly generates so much of. I think that this concept of not getting anything back is really a myth about volunteering, and I would think it's fair to say that people that volunteer understand what they get back, and it's not money, although in some cases eventually it actually could be. But when you provide and help others in your community, you always get back, always. I think kids are natural environmentalists, and when you look at schools going towards green policies, there is a ton of interest by the students. I think the other thing, and I think this is, if you can emphasize this, you can't emphasize it enough, is that when you look at what is going on and you look at the numbers, it can be very daunting and it can make you feel like, well, whatever I do doesn't make a difference. I think that the important thing to stress is that every little bit makes a huge difference, and that, tiny changes on a very small scale, when used over mass numbers, can be huge changes. And I think it's also important for kids, and I think one of the reasons that they are natural recyclers is because, kids have an interesting time growing up, as you mentioned, and when they feel like they can be the ones that are helping, they can be the ones that are protecting the earth, they can be the ones that are making the change, that's very empowering for kids, because so often, because they are growing up, they don't have any, they're the ones being cared for, they're the ones being managed, and when you can flip it around and say, hey, you get to be the one in charge, you get to be the one who's helping, you get to be the one who's doing the saving and the helping, it's awesome for kids, it's very empowering for them. I think for the most part, I don't think that you have to convince kids that they should recycle. My experience with kids has been, they are very aware of why they should recycle. So that part I don't really think it requires a lot of attention. I think it's good to make sure that kids are aware of the issues. But I don't think that's something that you need to spend a lot of time trying to convince them of recycling. I think how do they engage their parents is a matter that requires some attention, because it's so different depending on the family. I mean, it's one of those interpersonal realms that it's really hard to know how best to do that sort of discussion. There are a couple things you know, it depends a lot on the community as well as, you know, interpersonal relationships. Probably the best way is to know, you know, and this requires a lot of local knowledge of the, you know, kids in question, is, you know, what options are available to the families in the the local areas. Because if recycling is a huge burden, you know, that's going to be an issue. If recycling's offered free by the township or by another entity, well, that's a much easier way to have a conversation with the kids. A lot of it also depends on the school and how the school is presenting this information to the students. You know, if they have a local person in the school that's kind of heads up this sort of information, so that there's, you know, could be an easy website or something where parents can say, oh, what what's available, what can we do that doesn't require, you know, major changes in, you know, we have to drive 30 miles to recycle this, or that sort of thing. If you can make something like that available at the local level, it's a much easier conversation, and the kids can say, hey, there's this great website, blah, blah, blah. You can get to it from our school's webpage or Facebook friend, blah, blah, blah. And that really makes it a lot easier and takes the pressure off the kid, because that could be a tough time for a kid to try and, you know, get their parents involved if their parents are unwilling or maybe don't have resources to do major life changes that maybe they don't even need to do. Maybe they're just very small, subtle changes. I think one of the great things about recycling is we can all see how willing everybody is to, you know, make the effort at some level, and that I think if we make reasonable choices as communities, we can find ways that are much more economically advantageous and much more environmentally advantageous. I think clearly there's a lot of interest. I think most communities have shown how much they're interested in this sort of pursuit, and recycling itself is a losing, just on so many levels, is a losing way of dealing with our waste. And really, I think we need to kind of redefine the waste of our society and how we generate it, why we generate so much, and really kind of go from there, and kind of do a do-over and see, now that we have a lot more options, what we should be doing, instead of just trying to deal with this on the back end with a little bit of recycling and sorting and saying, well, I'm not going to put this little piece in the landfill. We need to address it on a much grander scale.
Right on.
But I think that the awesome thing and the really great thing is I think that people have really shown that there's a will and a desire for that to happen, and we just need to make it happen.